Welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for women in business. Each week, we feature interviews and advice to help you step into your power and lead your way. Now here's your host, women's leadership expert, Eleanor Beaton.
Hello, this is Eleanor Beaton, and you are listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership, the success podcast for ambitious women in business. And this is episode number 32. Now, my guest, I have a very special guest for you today. She is all kinds of brave, demonstrates a ton of courage, and has that sort of caring pragmatism that you absolutely want to have in a trusted advisor. So Sarah Vermunt was well into her Ph.D. as an organizational psychologist when she really had an epiphany and realized, this does not feel good. This is not what I want. And of course, by that time, she's invested a ton of money and time and energy into developing a career and an identity as an academic. And so for her to recognize it was not what she wanted to do, take a step away from that, and ultimately take a chance to build a business, that was a huge risk that she took. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring her on the show, because I think that it's important for us as fearless women in business to hear the stories of women who have gone before, who have taken the risk, and who have come out the other side just fine. And Sarah is a shining example of this. She is the founder of CareerGasm. Sarah Vermunt helps people figure out what the heck they want so they can quit jobs they hate and do work they love. So she's a career and entrepreneur coach, and she helps people create work that feels good. She founded CareerGasm because she believes that everyone can pursue mind-blowing work that thrills and delights. She writes about careers and feel-good work at Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., and the Huffington Post. Her work has been featured at Fortune, the Financial Times, Global News, the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Flair Magazine, U.S. News and World Report. She used to teach at the School of Business and Economics at Wilfrid Laurier University, where she does have some fancy degrees, and she is just a delight and pleasure to have on the show. So, ladies, I give you Sarah Vermunt of CareerGasm. Sarah Vermunt, welcome to Fierce Feminine Leadership.
Thank you, Eleanor.
So where are you today? Where are you located?
I'm at my home office in a big comfy leather chair looking out at a rather blue sky.
Beautiful. And where are you based? What city are you based in?
I'm in Toronto.
Got it. All right. My alma mater's in Toronto. I lived there for many years. Love the city.
Me too. I've been here for 17 years now.
Awesome. So I am so excited to welcome you onto the show. And before we get into what you do, how you do it, and how you help people, I've got to ask you, CareerGasm, where did that name come from? It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's an unusual name and one that people remember. Believe it or not, CareerGasm came about because I couldn't find and get the business name I wanted. I was interested in creating a company that combined aspects of like career and happiness, career and joy, and all the combination of names I wanted. Either the social media handles were taken or the domain names were taken or there was some sort of trademark. And so I was like, oh, I really want to combine these elements of like career, but also like a career that feels good. And then I was like, well, what feels better than a CareerGasm? And so that's how I came up with it. Kind of interesting because it demonstrates that some really good things can come from constraints.
Absolutely. And, speaking of constraints, I want to dive right in. I'm going to ask you about your business in a moment and what you do. But one of the most fascinating things to me about your bio is that it starts really, your business comes from a turning point, and you talk about how you were well into a PhD program that I'm assuming you worked very hard to get into in the first place, and you left. You had a change of heart. Can you take us back to that moment and tell us what happened?
Oh, yeah, that was such a pivotal moment for me. So I was doing a PhD in organizational behavior and human resources management. So everybody knows what HR is. If you don't know what organizational behavior are, it's like workplace psychology. And I was in my fourth year of the program. I had already been 2 years past finishing my comps, well into my dissertation, close to the tail end of finishing some of the research there. And I had actually hated it for the last 2 years. I loved the first 2 years of the program where I was doing coursework, loved teaching students, loved teaching, but I realized I hated doing research. And I actually had a meltdown, a very public meltdown at a Starbucks when I just couldn't take it anymore. And that day I decided to quit.
Wow. And so you said you'd been hating it for 2 years. Why didn't you make the move sooner?
I experienced the same things that a lot of my clients experience with actually before they quit their jobs. And that is the justifying why you have to finish and why it makes sense to do the logical thing and thinking about all the time you've put into something and what the right path is. And I told myself that I'd already put a lot of work into it, and so I might as well just finish. But I grew to progressively hate it, and at some point something had to give. And I actually think that's what happens with a lot of people. People don't quit on a whim. People quit when they just can't effing do it anymore.
They're done.
Yeah. And so I can really relate to the people I work with every day because I've been in their shoes.
Now, it's so interesting because, so take us through, because I'm sure there are people listening who effing hate what they're doing right now. So, and there are a lot of, fears that prevent them from taking that next step. What are the most common fears that you see that keep people in work that does not feel good? And what insight do you have around those fears that you can share with people?
Sure. Yeah, there's some common ones. Actually, just this morning, I was working with a woman who, one of her fears is that her skills aren't transferable. She's been working down a particular career path, and she's only done that type of work. So she has a really hard time seeing how all of her skills and abilities could be applicable to something else. And of course they are, but she's used to seeing her work and her skills and abilities in a certain light. And so she has a really hard time seeing it in a potentially different career because she's afraid no one will see her value. So fear of not being valued, fear of being rejected if you apply for something else. Two other common fears come to mind that sort of keep people paralyzed. One is the fear of what will people think. This is actually the biggest one that my people experience, the people I work with. I work with a lot of people who have prestigious jobs, who, work in things like law or finance, have a lot of degrees, and they've worked very hard to get where they are. And there's a lot of fear about changing course because, they often get asked the question, well, why on earth would you do that? Why would you give up your job as a corporate lawyer to become a brewmaster? Actually, I have a client who did that exact transition. In case you were thinking that's a severe change, it actually happened. Another fear that prevents people from moving forward and sort of keeps them paralyzed, and a big one, money. People are really afraid that they're going to be living in a van down by the river if they make a career change. And usually the money fears are way overblown. Money is definitely something you have to consider, but the stories we tell ourselves about financial dire straits are just crazy.
So I want to get into some of those fears in a moment, because I think that'll be really valuable for people who are listening. But I want to get back to your story. So you left your Ph.D. What happened next? How did you get into business?
Well, I was already starting my business. I had already become a career coach. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with it. And so I sort of did a slow build while I was in school. I had planned to finish the degree and then move more fully into it, but I suddenly found myself moving into it much more quickly than I expected. So I had been working on the business all along. I had a solid plan. I knew who I wanted to work with, but I didn't have a lot of clients yet. So it was a risky move on my part.
Got it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit then about where you are today with your business. Who do you serve? What do you do?
Well, I'm a career and entrepreneur coach. So I usually help 3 different groups of people. The first group I help is aspiring career changers. So people who know that they don't like their job, but they don't know what they want. There's sort of 2 different kinds of career coaches out there. Some are strategy coaches and some are clarity coaches. The strategy coaches are for people who know they know what they want and they just need a little bit of help to get there. I'm a clarity coach, so I'm someone who helps people figure out what they actually want. And you would not believe the number of people out there who are stuck in jobs they hate just because they don't know what they want. So that's my first group of people. Second group of people I serve are new graduates, many of who also don't know what they want. They studied something because their mom or dad thought they should, or they studied something they chose, but somewhere along the way, they figured maybe it's not the right fit anymore, or they're just not sure how to get their career started. There's a lot of paralysis for new grads, so they just need a little bit of help starting their careers. So I've got career changers, people starting their careers. And then I also have people who are really wanting to start their own business, but have no idea what the heck they're doing. And I work with solopreneurs, so people who actually are their business, and solopreneurs who are service professionals. So people like coaches and consultants and designers. And I just help them set the foundation for their business because it's really hard to do on your own.
It is really challenging, to do on your own. When you look at your business and as you have built it, you blog and write for some incredible publications like Forbes, Fortune, Flair, the Globe and Mail. Really interesting. Tell us about some of the key milestones for you in your development as an entrepreneur.
Sure. A lot of them have been in the writing world, so it's interesting that you've mentioned that. I can still remember when I opened the email when I first got accepted as a Forbes contributor, and I did a little happy dance while I was waiting for the streetcar downtown. So that felt like a big milestone for me. And then increasingly writing for places like Entrepreneur and Inc. and communities of people that I feel like I can really serve by talking about things that not many people talk about. So I don't talk about the things and write about the things that you would typically find in Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur. I talk more about like the emotions of career and the emotions of building your own business. And that's not something we see a lot of out there in the blogosphere. And I think that's why I've been successful doing it. My latest success I've had, I'd say, would be selling a book. So I have a book that's going to be coming out in March of 2017. And so that was a big thing for me. And that just happened last month.
And so tell us about what's the book going to be about?
Well, the book is called CareerGasm, Find Your Way to Feel Good Work. And it's for people who don't know what they want. They know they want out of their current career, but they don't know what they want or how to make a change.
Got it. Okay. Love it. So one of the things I'm going to get to some insight that you have for those people. One of the things that I want to hone in on, you are incredibly clear about who you serve, the problem that you solve for them and how you help them. Really clear in your communication around that. And I see that that's something that entrepreneurs often struggle with, particularly service-based entrepreneurs who are selling themselves. How did you arrive at that point of clarity where you can, say in a matter of, 60 seconds, this is what I do, this is what I don't do, this is who I help, and this is how I do it?
Yeah, like most others, I figured out the right way to do it by doing it totally the wrong way first. Gotta say, it's the best way to learn as much as you hate it.
I know.
I actually built an entirely different coaching company with way too broad of a mandate, attracting clients I, in fact, didn't like. And I had to scrap the whole thing 5 months in. And then I created CareerGasm.
Oh, I love that story. That is fabulous. Okay. So do you mind? I'm going to take a couple minutes to focus there. You had the courage to pivot.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I'm all about feel good work. And once I started noticing that my business actually felt crappy, I knew I had to make a change. And so I fell into the setback that many, many entrepreneurs fall into. And that is the fear of, well, maybe I should just offer a whole bunch of things so that I'll have enough clients. This is a thought that a lot of, especially new entrepreneurs, carry around with them, is this fear, well, what if I don't get enough clients? And so when I was just starting out, I had the same fear. And so I think I offered something crazy like 10 different programs for 10 different types of people, all coaching based because I'm a coach, but I hadn't really yet zoned in on exactly the kind of person I wanted to help and the kind of person I didn't want to help. And that's something that was really important to me to figure out, was the people that I didn't want to serve. And I think a lot of us do that. We end up inadvertently inviting in the wrong kind of people into our business. out of fear.
And so what did you do to remedy that situation so that when you built your next business, it was not something you were going to fold up the website after 5 months? What did you do differently the second time through?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I decided to scrap any program that was tailored for a super corporate type of person, because I'm just not a corporate chick. So I wasn't doing executive coaching anymore. I wasn't doing like large business scaling anymore. I wanted to work with individuals who were like a little bit unconventional and a little bit edgy. So I ended up creating programs just for them. And then because I knew exactly who I wanted to work with and exactly who I am and who I am not, I was like, okay, well, like no putting on false airs here. I'm a pretty kooky, unconventional, edgy person. And so that has to shine through my brand, which means I have a career coaching company that like you might see an F-bomb or two on my website, and it has like funny little cartoons on it. And that's exactly who I am. And it fits way better. Yeah.
It's one of the things that really sticks out about you. I mean, your business is called CareerGasm. Okay. That's like,
people know what they're getting into.
Exactly. But the brand is there, and when you do go to Sarah's site, you're going to see at CareerGasm.com, for your different programs, for instance, you've got like Betty Boop style a little bit, or like Betty and Veronica, I suppose, style women. It's really, really interesting. Tell me about your thoughts on branding as a differentiator.
I like to think, well, branding is so important as a differentiator. And I like to think of branding as not something that you build, but it's really more of an excavation. So stripping things down. And because I help solopreneurs, I think this is so important, particularly for solopreneurs, because you are your business. And so if you're trying to sort of build something that's separate from yourself, I think the branding comes across as not really on point. It's not really aligned. But if you're able to sort of strip things down to the essence, like really what's at the essence of who you are, what you do, and who you want to serve, I think it will work way better. And you have to be okay with some people loving your brand, the right people, and also with some people just not digging the vibe, because your people will find you if the brand is on point. And you have to be okay with that not being everybody.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So I know that there are going to be coaches and aspiring coaches listening today. Can you take us into your revenue model a little bit, your business model? What does that look like? How do you generate revenue in your business?
Sure. My model is actually shifting right now. So I've gotten to the point where my coaching practice is full. I'm actually having more people interested in working with me than I have, coach slots throughout the week. And I've built an online course for aspiring career changers. And I'm going to be building more online courses to serve the people that I can't work with one-on-one. So my model is high-end one-on-one coaching, either in person or like over video Skype. But I am finding myself moving more towards the online delivery system, which I love. I will never get rid of coaching people one-on-one, but I was a professor and I do love teaching and I do love curriculum. So I love that I'm building courses that people can do themselves as well.
Fabulous. And so tell us about how you market your business and build awareness around what you do. Again, a big challenge for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my biggest marketing tool has been two things. First and foremost, and I think this is true for anyone who has a service-based business, once you get going, is referrals. So if you treat your clients really well and do a really good job, they're going to tell people about your work. And so I get a lot of referrals from clients who've worked with me before. Maybe their sister will tell them about them, or a friend, or whoever, a colleague. But another really big source of marketing for me is writing. So all of those publications we were talking about that I write for is a way for me to be of service to people before they actually start paying me. And I think that's the best way to think about marketing is if you can do service-based marketing, whether it's, creating a podcast or writing for publications or even just starting with your own blog, it's a way for you to get your name out there, but also to be of service before you ask people for money. And in my mind, that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. Starting with the education. I love that. And, it was really interesting. I was sharing with Sarah before we actually started recording this interview that we're friends on Facebook, which we hadn't realized through sort of different communities we're a part of. And somebody in one of my groups that I host posted an article that Sarah had written in the Huffington Post. And I read it, loved it. And it reminded me, oh yeah, I've got to get her on the show. And then realized after I'd reached out through her website that we're friends on Facebook. So kind of a funny little story there. So I want to get into some of the fears. So let's start with the people who are listening, who are in a job that they don't like. They're feeling afraid about money. They're feeling afraid about what people will think. Can you provide some insight for them? What do they need to hear, or what should they know that will empower them to do work that feels good for them?
Yeah, well, the first one is, I think one of the reasons why coaching is very powerful is it forces you to articulate your stories aloud, right? There's nothing quite like saying what you're thinking aloud to another human being that helps you realize what your thinking is actually doing to your decision-making process. So when it comes to fear, actually talking out what you're, let's just focus on money, for example, right now. So let's say you're really afraid that you won't have enough money if you change your career, and you'll probably be out of a job, and maybe you'll lose your house, and maybe even lose your car, like these crazy stories that people blow up. And I think one of the most helpful questions that a coach can ask, or anyone can ask themselves, is that really true? Let's actually examine this story. So there's some wonderful work by a woman named Byron Katie called Thought Work. And she does this thought examination process just by asking, is it really true? And let's see if there's some evidence for a little bit of wiggle room. So is it really true that you're going to lose your house if you make a career shift? Or is there a way to do it in a way that will actually sustain you? And so by examining the stories, usually you can loosen the grip of the fear a little bit, because it's, a lot of the fears that people have are valid, but they're way overblown. So sure, there's some financial risk associated with making a career change sometimes, certainly not always. A career change can be very good financially often, but the stories are overblown. So we just have to examine the stories in a way that is not blown out of proportion, to look at them with facts.
And, it's what's fascinating is the speed with which somebody will go from, in their mind will go from, being relatively comfortable financially to being a bag lady, to having, to living, exactly, by the river. Really interesting how quickly that happens.
Yeah. And it happens, with any fear, not just money. Money is a really common one, but, even when someone is, worried about what people will think. Very often people have these massive fears about, what a parent or a spouse or colleagues or, I love my boss, like I can't betray her by leaving. We have these crazy stories about what will happen if we make a change. And for the most part, people are pretty supportive. And even if they're not, it doesn't matter as much as we thought it did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now let's switch to the people who are solopreneurs, or they're working within an organization and they want to go and launch their own business. They have no idea where to begin with that. You did that. Well, no, you had kind of started that while you were doing your PhD, but you said, you started your own business. Tell me about a little bit of insight that you can share for those people who are thinking about starting an organization or a company, a solopreneur type business. How can they best prepare? What do they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, lots of stuff, actually. Most important, I would say, I'm a big fan of the slow build, which is a really tough thing to wrap your head around if you're an ambitious type A go-getter kind of person, which I am as well. We want what we want it, and we want it right now. And that includes our business. We want to jump out of the job and be doing the business full time. But I think by doing a slow build, maybe while you keep the job for a couple of months, is good, because it gives you the financial security that you need to build a little safety net financially, so that when you do jump into the business full time, you've got some support there. Also, it gives you a way to work out your ideas for the business. So, for example, when I did my business wrong the first time, I was still working as a professor, thankfully. So I had an income. And it gave me the time I needed to test and experiment what this business was going to look like before I actually made the full jump. And, it's interesting. That's something we don't talk a lot about in entrepreneurship is the importance of trial and error. We think if we have a killer business plan, we're off to the races. But very often you have to feel it out and see what works for you, what works for your clients in order to get it right. I know that's the way it worked for me. And I think that's the way it works for most people.
Absolutely. I talk about it in terms of, being on the court. So it's, you can watch a lot of basketball, but ultimately, it's a dynamic thing, just like business. And the place to play it is on the court, where you can respond, you can adjust, you can make these, moves that you need to make in order to be effective. So interesting, the idea of a slow build, because that's a little bit counter, not only to, the type A type of personality, but also to our culture. Do you not think?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, certainly. It's something I struggled with. It's something that all of my clients struggle with. And yet it's important to get it right, to give yourself a little bit of time to let things percolate, to do, iterations of, even if you didn't get things totally wrong, like I did in my first iteration, you always need to make small adjustments at the very least. And so a slow build gives you the time to do the small adjustments before your livelihood depends on it. And so I think it's much easier to enter a business when you're not in panic mode about your finances.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit, for you now in your business, as you're starting to change your business model a little bit, you've got a book coming down the horizon. I thought I might have heard a little person in the background there earlier, maybe. Or...
Actually, that's the little person that lives next door.
Oh, okay. All right. How do you, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you manage your time. So, you've got clients, you've got kind of you speak, you do writing. Now you've got a book coming out. Tell us a little bit about how you manage your time as a solopreneur.
It's so interesting because I just published a blog post about this today. So it's actually on the top of my mind. I went through a radical shift in terms of my schedule about 2 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. So I used to schedule out different chunks for different activities during my day. I used to write in the morning, see clients in the afternoon, do administrative work peppered in between. If I had a speaking gig, I would just fit it in. And that was not working for me. It was working for my coaching practice, but I noticed that when I would write in the mornings, my writing, I wouldn't really get into the groove until just a little bit before I had to stop. So I would start seeing clients at noon, but I was really only getting into the groove around by 11. It actually takes me quite a while to ease into work and establish a flow. And so I started only working on one thing per day and going really deep and staying there. So I have writing days where I do nothing but write. I have coaching days where I coach morning until the evening. And I have administrative days, and thankfully there's fewer of those, where I'm let's say, working on a new program or fixing my website, checking email, that sort of stuff. And boy, does it ever work for me. And it took me a long time to figure out that was how I should be working, because that's not how most people work.
That's so interesting. And that really gets back to trial and error. I mean, so often, right? So often when we're planning out our schedule or organizing ourselves, we're doing, it's like when we start that as a kid. Oh, it's 7 a.m. It's breakfast time. Oh, it's 12 o'clock, time to take a lunch break. Whereas, what you're describing is exercising your freedom to make the choices.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with expectations as well. So for example, for those of us who are writers, we've heard of this thing called the morning pages, and you're supposed to write in the morning and you're supposed to be really vigilant about it. And that's how you work if you're a real writer. Well, that didn't work for me, but that's the only way I was looking at it for a long time, because I thought that's the way you're quote unquote supposed to do it. And so, I was sort of just falling in line with expectations about how it was supposed to work, but it didn't work for me.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So tell us then, I'm fascinated with people's morning routines. I just kind of am. What's your morning routine?
I am so not a morning person. And so I have set my morning routine with that in mind. So I get up in the morning and I don't ever see any clients before 9:30. 9:30 is the earliest I start because I want to be on by the time I'm working with my clients. So whether I'm working with a client, I'll usually start at 9:30. If I'm doing writing or something, I can flow into that much more easily. So I start a bit earlier. But my morning routine is to sort of get up, make a green smoothie, give a little snuggle to my cat, just sort of like open my email, get things set administratively so that I know what I'm doing the day. I always have my schedule set the day before with everything I want to accomplish, so I don't even have to think about it once I start work. And then I just have at it. An interesting new routine I've developed isn't actually a morning routine, it's a lunch routine. I just finished a month-long sort of personal experiment where I'm forcing myself to take an hour-long lunch break every day, which I have not done for years, and I know most people don't do. And it's been so fabulous that I'm keeping it forever. It's been wonderful.
Oh, I love that. The value of rest for your brain too it's incredible.
It's been actually fantastic for productivity. I've done more. So I did this experiment in April, and I did more in April than I had done in any other month in my work ever. I worked with more clients. I sold my book. I published a bunch of articles. I was really massively productive in less time by taking a lunch.
Oh, I love it. Fabulous. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been such a pleasure to have you. Before I let you go, I want to ask you any parting insight or advice for people who are listening, who want something and they're just not sure what it is or how to get it.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind, and this is really tricky, is whether it comes to career or business, whatever domain you live in, it's not just about logic. Intuition plays a large part of career planning and a large part of business planning, actually. And very often we use logic to discredit the things we know intuitively. And so my best parting advice would just be to sort of lean into your intuition because it'll help you make some really good decisions.
Awesome. And how do you do that?
With a lot of practice. It's really hard at first, but just acknowledging how you feel about things versus just how you think about things is a good place to start.
Yeah, that's a great piece of insight, and so true. And I'm sure that, a lot of people who come to coaching are there because they're in their head.
Yeah. And we all get stuck there. Even those of us who are coaches, sometimes we need a little bit of help with that stuff too.
Absolutely.
It's a natural human thing to get stuck in your head. But if you can find a way to acknowledge what's true for you, even if you're not sure why, or you can't rationalize it or explain it, there's usually something there.
Yeah. Excellent. Where can our fierce ladies go to learn more about you and your work?
They can find me at CareerGasm.com, and I've got all of my social media handles right there. So I'm really easy to find. If you're on Twitter or Instagram, I'm just CareerGasm or CareerGasm.com. Lots of places to find me.
Awesome. So CareerGasm.com. We will have a link to your site in our show notes. Sarah Vermunt, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight with us today.
Thank you so much, Eleanor.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Fierce Feminine Leadership. Be sure to head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. While you're there, leave us a fierce review. When you leave a review, your name is automatically entered into a monthly draw. Each month, we'll draw one reviewer to automatically receive a private coaching session with women's leadership expert Eleanor Beaton. So remember, head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Then leave us a review for your chance to win a private coaching session with Eleanor Beaton. Go to EleanorBeatonPodcast.com and sign up to get your free cheat sheet, the 5 critical leadership skills of 7-figure business women. This free download will help you diagnose the exact skills you need to see major growth in your business and career. Head over to EleanorBeatonPodcast.com and get your free download today.